Jai Hind everyone, I am Dr. Monika Agarwal, Assistant Professor, AKGEC Engineering College, Department of Applied Sciences and Humanities. My subject is Soft Skill 1, KNC 101. The topic of today's lecture is Levels of Communication. The topics covered in this lecture are, first of all, the determining of the level of communication, then what are different levels. I will be dealing with three levels: intrapersonal, interpersonal and mass communication level. First of all, how to determine the level of communication is a question. So, we must understand that the determining factor of the levels of communication is based on the number of people involved in the process of communication. In my earlier lecture, I have discussed what is the process of communication. The human factor involved in the process of communication are either sender or receiver. They are the communicators. So, the number of the people involved in the process of communication determines the level of communication, and this level is arranged in the ascending order. It means we will start at the minimum number of people involved and then we will go further. As is said by Aristotle, a wise person of the ancient world, that knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. So, we should begin with this level, that knowing yourself is the first level of communication also, as this figure shows that within the self of a person there continues a communication, the communication of the person within his or her own self. That is the very first level. As we have noticed that at least number of times or always we are indulged in a process of self analysis. Sometimes we talk to our own self, sometimes we ask question to our own self, sometimes we stand in front of a mirror and we talk to our own self. Okay. Sometimes we speak in isolation, we are solitary and we are speaking to ourselves. Okay. That is called self conversation. That is the first stage or the first level of communication, and this level is called intrapersonal communication. So, the first level of communication is intrapersonal communication. Intra means within. So, the communication within the self of the individual is called intrapersonal communication. Means the whole process of initiating, encoding, decoding, then sending the response as the feedback, it continues within the self of an individual. And here the brain and other parts of body, these are the communicators. So, brain is connected to the parts of body, and this connection is made with the channel of the electrochemical system that exists within a human body. So, brain communicates with other parts of body, and in return the other parts of body also communicate to brain. That we all know that this is a very, you can say, physiochemical process, and this is all studied in psychology also, but here we are studying it as a level of communication where the process of communication takes place within the self of the individual. Here the brain is the sender sometime, brain is the receiver sometime. The different parts of the body are the sender sometime and different parts are the receiver sometime. The nervous system connects all the parts of the body with brain. This is how this process of communication takes place, and this level pertains to thinking, the thinking process. In the nutshell we can call it thinking process. The person thinks within himself or herself, and we know that this is the basis of all information. We say many things to other people after analyzing it within ourselves, as this picture shows that we analyze the thing before we talk to other person. That level is called intrapersonal level, because this is a kind of internal dialogue. Dialogue means the communication within two people, the expression and the response, and that is the internal dialogue within the person, and no further level is possible without this level. So, the communication starts at this level, and the further level, as we have known earlier, are interpersonal and mass communication level, and many other levels which are determined on the basis of one reference point or the other. All the other levels of communication are possible only with the help of this intrapersonal communication at its foundation, at its basis. We also notice that when we communicate with others, this internal dialogue continues. When we communicate with others, simultaneously we communicate within ourselves also, as planning, determining, weighing, judging, considering. These are the different psychological processes, internal processes which go on within ourselves at the time when we are indulged in external talk with other person. So, this is the basis, this is the foundation of all other levels of communication. The communication within oneself, that is the intrapersonal communication, and we know that this is very necessary. The significance of this level is undeniable. Without doing communication very you can say very responsibly at this level, we cannot communicate in the external world responsibly. So, it is very important to judge and know what continues at this level of communication within the person. This intrapersonal communication is reflected in many psychological processes. In fact, all the psychological processes are the outcome of this intrapersonal level of communication. I have listed a few, that is self-motivation, self-determination, inner analysis. These are the positive aspect of this psychological process. Sometime inner conflict, the person within himself decides what to do, what not to do. So, these are some expressions within the person of the intrapersonal communication. These are the purposes for which a person indulges in the internal intrapersonal communication at the conscious level. Okay. Some expressed example of intrapersonal communication are, which can be seen or which can be noticed by other people, like daydreaming. Okay. When we are lost in our thoughts without noticing what is going on around us. The nocturnal dreaming, the dreams which we have during our sleeps, that is also a kind of intrapersonal communication. Our brain is active, and since the other parts of the body are cut off, the brain is active within itself. Speaking aloud to own self. Many of us have found ourselves in a very awkward situation when we find that we are speaking aloud to our own self. In fact, speaking aloud for own self means you are reading sometime aloud, and that reading is meant to be heard by you only. That speaking aloud, reading aloud are the expressions of the intrapersonal communication. In fact, all the writings which a person writes, whether as a writer, professional writer, creative writer, or just to talk to the other person in a written way, that writing is also a kind of expression of one's intrapersonal communication. And sometimes we make gestures while thinking. We don't notice that, but we make gestures. That is also an, you can say, expressed way of intrapersonal level of communication. So, these are the things we notice in our behavior every day, that we indulge in intrapersonal communication before going further at other levels of communication. So, that is the basis. So, we should be very conscious about what is going on in our internal self or in our consciousness. We must be aware of the pros and cons of this intrapersonal communication. Some of the pros I have mentioned here, that self-awareness comes only through intrapersonal communication, self-management comes only through advanced intrapersonal communication, and confidence, that is the amalgamation of all the positive attitudes of a human being, that is also the result of the better and the positive intrapersonal communication. So, these are the some of the pros, the advantages, but there are some disadvantages also. If we indulge too much at this level of communication, ignoring other things around us which actually exist in our surrounding, we are likely to indulge in overthinking, and overthinking does not always give positive picture. Sometimes we create misconceptions, we indulge in our own self and we understand things in our own way, and that results in misconception, and that will be reflected in incorrect decisions. If we are very much self-indulgent, if we always think within ourselves without considering the reality around us, without considering the other people's opinion, without considering the facts, then that may result in misconceptions and that will result in incorrect decisions. Some of the cons are also there. So, that level where we are talking to ourselves is the determining level of the further levels of communication. This is to be taken care of because that is going to determine the other levels of communication. So, the next level, as I have said, the levels are decided by the number of people involved in the process of communication. So, at the initial level only one person was there, the minimum number, one person was there, and the communication was going on within the self of that person. The next level is called interpersonal communication. Inter means between, personal means the two people. This level of communication takes place between at least two people, and this is the external process of exchange of information. Communication, which is an exchange of information, ideas, feelings, etc. This is the external process and becomes interpersonal level of communication, where two or more people, few more people are communicating, exchanging information through verbal or non-verbal means, in oral or written type, does not matter, but that is an exchange of information between at least two people. One is the sender and the other is the receiver. In fact, the process, the standard process which we have studied is based on this level of communication, because this level is taken as an example to analyze the standard process of communication, where one is the sender and the other is the receiver, and they exchange information, their roles swipe, sender becomes the receiver, receiver becomes the sender, and this is how the process of communication takes place for fulfilling some immediate purpose or to ensure that two people are in a state of communication. Whenever they will need some cooperation or the help of the other person, the support of the other person, they will start the external process of communication. And this level of communication, that is interpersonal level of communication, is the test to measure the interpersonal skills of a person. The more the person is skilled in the interpersonal capabilities, the better communicator he is, the effective his communication is. So, this level tests the skill of a person, and that determines the effectiveness of communication, the effectiveness of person's capability of transferring messages to others. So, that is the real stage, or that is the real place where the person reflects the outcome of what is going on within the self at the intrapersonal level, and how competent he or she is at the interpersonal skills. Interpersonal skills are a different you can say range of skills which are taken as helpful while indulging at this level of communication. There are soft skills. In fact, those skills should be sharpened by people to be a better communicator, to be a more meaningful person, to be a successful professional. So, the examples of interpersonal communication, as I have mentioned a few, the sharing of information among people, the people who are in close proximity of us. We communicate with people who are around us. The people in close physical proximity indulge in this level of communication, whether oral or through verbal means or through non-verbal means, through body language, through gestures, etc. The people share information. The interaction among friends, among family members, whether it is for some petty purpose or some higher purpose. This is informal and general. That is a general and informal type of communication. And when we interact with people at workplace, that becomes a formal or professional type of communication. These are the occasions, these are the situations where we indulge in this level of communication. We can understand the relation between intrapersonal communication and interpersonal communication with the help of this figure. The person involved in the process of communication, first of all, A may be the sender, B may be the receiver. A may be having some discussion within himself, that is shown here, that is also a mechanism, a process, and B may be having some other thing or the similar topic, but in his own way he is discussing and analyzing and understanding it. These are the two individuals, and the outcome of this intrapersonal discussion or communication is expressed in the form of interpersonal communication. So, intrapersonal level of communication affects and determines the interpersonal level of communication, what the people actually share, how they share, and what is the purpose and what is the outcome. So, this is the external environment where with the use of some channel, the message which is encoded by the sender is transmitted to the other person who is here taken as the receiver, and then the receiver understands it and then gives back the feedback. That is the response of the person. So, this is how the process continues. So, without the intrapersonal level, interpersonal level of communication is not possible at all. Next level which we are going to understand and discuss in this lecture is, that is mass communication level. As the word suggests, mass is the opposite of the word class. So, this is the communication where the target is a whole mass of people. So, it is a communication with the masses, with the whole population of people, a selected geographical area, and the people living in that area are called masses, and that is a mixture of all the variety of people, all the classes. If we consider it from the person of the age, from the point of view of the age, then the youngs, the olds, all. If we consider from the point of view of the gender, then male, female, both, and every type of variety is present in that group, that population, that is called masses. So, this is the mass level of communication which is done with the masses. There is a large number of people at together, and that is done with the help of a mediator. This level of communication needs a mediator. Along with the channel, it needs a mediator also. So, here the sender transmits the message to the population altogether. The receiver is not a single person, it is not a small group of people, it is a large group of people that can be called a whole population in that particular geographical area, and the sender transmits the message through some channel with the help of a mediator to the whole population altogether. And the receivers are a mixed group of people with all the possible variety. As I have said, there is all the possible variety, literate, illiterate, young, old, male, female, professionals, non-professionals, every person, healthy, unhealthy, sick, every type of variety of human beings is present. So, this type of communication has a different form. It may be done in oral form, as I have said, it may be done in written form, which are the basic forms, types of communication. So, we can be communicating in oral form of the message, we can be communicating through the written form of the message. So, oral communication takes place through that media, that mass media it is called, because we need a mediator. Okay. So, the media is a collection of different mediums. So, if we are using that kind of mass media which uses the sound symbols of the content, that is oral mass communication. And the example of these are like if we broadcast something, telecast something on radio, if we use some microphone or public address system to make some announcement or some amplifier. So, there we are communicating with masses with the help of some device to give them the oral message, this in the form of sounds. The other form is written form. Written form of mass communication needs some print media, okay, or some visual media, as we have newspapers, magazines and TV, etc. So many things through internet. Okay. So, this can be oral, this can be written, but the media will be chosen accordingly. So, we have two kinds of mass media, two forms of mass media. First is print media. Print media like journals, books, newspaper, magazines in print, or the media which presents the text as we search on internet. Okay. We use some search engine and we find some material on the related topic which we want to search for. So, that is the print media, where we read the words of some language, where we read and use our visual capacity to understand things, to grasp knowledge or to grasp information. So, that is print media. The other is electronic mass media. Electronic media, there is a variety of electronic media. Earlier it was like radio, that like and television broadcasts, etc. But these days we have this digital platform with the help of internet, and so many you can say a whole lot of information. The lot of information is provided through electronic mass media that has become more powerful these days, right. So, these days for mass communication, this electronic mass media is used, mostly used, but print media has its own value, and printing may be either in the form of printing on paper, or it may be like text on the electronic mass media. So, we have these two mass media, and the which forms of mass media and which medium we find suitable, we select. So, the sender has to make a selection of the correct medium at this stage also to be more effective, to be more meaningful. Some of the characteristics of mass communication we should understand, because this level of communication is different from the previous two levels, that is intrapersonal, interpersonal level. This is a communication level which has certain peculiar characteristics like large reach, it is impersonal, it is persuasive, and there is a presence of a gatekeeper. We will understand it one by one. This is the example of just to understand that we have a variety of mass media available, and these varieties have their own specific characteristics and powers, strengths, and the person has to make a right selection of the medium to be effective through this level of communication. First of all, the importance of this level of communication is that it has large reach. Mass media communication reaches a large number of audience altogether, which is scattered over a wide geographical area. So, this has a large reach. At once we are connected with a large number of people altogether. So, on one side there is sender who has some purpose, he uses some medium and the mediator, and on the other side there is a whole mass of people who is going to receive that message or that information. So, it reaches to a wide audience, and that is a public in general. Okay, and that is from nearly every class of people. We find that in a particular geographical area the percentage may vary, but we have nearly every class of people. So, that message reaches to the wide audience. So, the message must be in simple language, the language which is mostly understood by our audience, our target audience. We may be targeting one particular part of that large population, but that message is meant for everyone. So, the language, the style should be so as to be understood by every person in that audience, by all sections of audience. and they must be able to comprehend its meaning. So, this is the aspect of its reach. It has a very large and wide reach. Next is impersonal nature. It is peculiar about mass communication that this level is highly impersonal, because it is not related to one particular person or a few people or a small group of people. It is largely impersonal as the participants are unknown to each other. In fact, we do not know the sender and the receiver in person. On the receiving end, there is a large crowd of people, masses of people, and the identity of the people in that crowd is unknown to each other. So, since it is meant for large audience, it is impersonal. It cannot be personal. So, no message of very personal nature or very, you can say, specific nature meant to be read by just one person is given, should be given through mass media. And the information is mostly of common interest, like some news, like some advertisement, like some general information for public awareness. So, this level of communication has its utility as a means to give information to people about some information of common interest, news of common interest, for some advertisement, for some propaganda, and some information that is given with the target of general awareness. So, this is a medium which is used to reach number of people for some common interest, some common information. And very importantly, the content once communicated at this level of communication does not remain personal. Once you communicate through this level of communication, the content becomes general. It does not remain personal anymore. So, this level of communication has impersonal nature. Third is the persuasiveness. Since the purpose of using this level of communication is to influence people at a very large number, so most of the communication at this level is for commercial or promotional purpose, like advertising or publicity. So, the content should be impressive and it should be delivered in a persuasive way. So, mass level of communication is persuasive in nature more than any other form of communication, more than any other communication at any other level. It is the most persuasive type, because the purpose of this communication is to influence people, to affect their choices, to affect their decisions mostly, to mold their overall thinking and understanding. So, most of the communication at this level is for commercial purpose, for advertising, for promotional purpose. So, it has to be persuasive. Another thing is, since no immediate feedback is possible, because sender just sends the message through this medium, through some mass media, and immediate feedback is not possible. It takes some time. Okay. So, the sender needs to be highly effective in its very first attempt, because there are less chances of rectification on the basis of the responses of the people. So, the sender needs to be very careful and highly effective in the very first attempt, so that he is able to fulfill the goal of his communication. He needs to be persuasive, he needs to be effective. The very peculiar feature of mass communication is that there is a presence of a gatekeeper. It is called gatekeeper. This is a technical term because the mediator functions as a gatekeeper. Gatekeeper means the person who checks and restricts the unwanted entry. Similarly, mass communication needs additional persons, additional people. There may be people, there may be institutions, there may be organizations to convey the message from sender to the receiver. And these additional people are known as gatekeepers or mediators. And these are the publishing houses. It could be a person, it could be a whole organized group of persons, and they are active transferring and sending information from the source or the sender to the target audience through mass media. So, these are the organizations, these are the publishing houses, these are the companies where people are appointed and people are working to actively transfer the desired message, the intended message to the target audience with the help of the media, that may be print media or electronic media. Means in there are some people who edit the content which is there to be communicated through their publishing house or through their company. These editors are taken as gatekeeper. It may be a single person or a group of people, the editorial board it may be, they function as a gatekeeper who checks and restricts the unwanted entry. Here the editors have to check and find the content of the message fine. They have to decide whether the content of the message is right to be communicated at the mass level or not. So, these editors are taken as the gatekeeper or the mediators. We can understand the role of the editors in a better way because an editor is a person who is a critical reader or analyzer of the content and whose job is to polish and refine the article or the message of the content, and they may be anything, they may be some advertisement, they may be some article, anything. The editor has to check and decide whether the content is worth publishing, worth broadcasting, worth communicating at the mass level or not. So, they have to edit and they have to decide. The editors work for magazine, they work for newspaper, they work for other social sites also, and editors are responsible for checking facts, they are responsible for checking the expression like language, the spelling, grammar, punctuation, but more they are responsible for checking facts, because editors have to decide upon the content to be published and to be broadcast, and they take the responsibility if some controversy takes place. If some controversial content gets published, it is the duty, it is the responsibility of the editor also, of that publishing house or that media house. So, the editors have to be very careful and critical while determining the nature of the content to be broadcast, to be published, to be communicated at this level of communication. So, we know that from starting from an individual's level, the level can go up to a very mass level, that can be the whole world altogether, because the things which are put on internet, they can be, those things can be accessed by anyone, anywhere. So, the level starts from one single individual and it broadens up to the whole world, the people living at every corner of the world. So, the level of communication is decided on the basis of the number of people involved in the process of communication. The same process takes place at every level, in internal level, interpersonal level, as well as mass communication level, but with its own peculiar features, because at the level of interpersonal communication some barriers take place, at the level of mass communication some specific requirements are there. So, every level has its own specific advantages, disadvantages, powers and limitations. Intrapersonal level is within the self of an individual. Then comes the interpersonal level, the communication of the exchange of information for creating understanding, for seeking cooperation between at least two people or some more people, but it is a small group. Then comes the mass level of communication, where a large number of people are involved, and this level is done, this level functions with the help of a mediator, that is a mass media, that can be print media or electronic media. That was the summing up, and this is the source. Thank you all जय हिंद।